Today marks the embargo lift for Gears of War 4, the newest endeavor by the Coalition for Xbox and PC. The PC version is pushed exclusively through Windows Store right now and requires Windows 10 Anniversary Edition to play. Not just Windows 10, you gotta download the Anniversary Edition update, which will tie you to an account. But we've already got the drivers from AMD and Nvidia that support the game. If you want to learn more about the game's performance, check out our separate Gears of War 4 PC benchmark video. But today, with the help of GN's Keegan Gallick, we're reviewing Gears of War 4 for its gameplay mechanics, visuals, and single-player storyline. Gears of War 4 is only the second title of the franchise to make it fully to PC, despite a 10-year history in the gaming space. This is the quintessential console title, and third-person shooter at that is now made available on PC through the unified API used across Windows 10 and Xbox alike, which we've previously dissed pretty hard. With DirectX 12 used as the low-level API, Gears of War 4 is one of the newer titles at the front of the API space, making it good for benchmarking. But of course, we want to talk about the gaming and actually, interestingly, the experience of getting the game through Windows Store. Besides being our first user experience with the Windows 10 Store, this was also our first real experience with Gears of War on PC. Having played the originals on the Xbox with the Xbox controller, we were a little bit skeptical of how the game would play with a mouse and keyboard, and the core design of Gears does seem to favor controllers. Just something about dual thumbsticks that makes sense when dashing between walls to take cover, and it all generally feels a bit more natural with that input setup. And despite this history that would seem to stack the odds in favor of only DualShock controllers, the game plays surprisingly well on the keyboard and mouse, and that's reinforced by an updated user interface that more clearly depicts character direction and course of movement. Default key bindings bind most of the movement actions to spacebar, as done with running, rolling, taking or leaving cover, and just about any other action that involves movement. And PC thankfully does allow for separation of roll and run inputs and of enter and leave inputs, something we found useful to avoid jamming the spacebar for just about everything. And it often does result in positioning that's undesired if you leave spacebar assigned to all the movements, but again, it's easily reassigned. The movement has also been improved for PC in general with Gears of War 4. In previous titles, the game struggled to understand the direction of movement if traveling at any angle other than a straight line perpendicular to the center of the screen. In Gears 4, turning has been sharpened, which proves beneficial when dodging weather effects like flying debris and lightning strikes that have been added to Gears 4. And that brings us into the big addition to the Gears of War 4 gameplay mechanics, storms. This is a mechanic that the Coalition has been promoting heavily since it first disclosed the function and showed directly during our Pascal laptop coverage at the NVIDIA London event. The game attempts to create an intimidating environment with its storms and pursuant destruction of the surrounding cityscape, using lightning strikes as impromptu mini-challenges demanding precision as players navigate through those strikes, almost like a simplified version of what you might see in a puzzle game, just with more death involved. But this is part of why that more fine-tuned control and movement and input that Gears 4 has is actually important, because you've got to navigate these things and precision is now required. Gears is most recognizable for its beefed up characters though, and is immediately known for its brick-jawed brutes splattered in blood as they drive the Lancer chainsaw gun through up-close enemies. This is the heart of what Epic Games originally set forth to create, now under the guidance of the Coalition. And this Gears is the start point for a new storyline within the game. Gears of War 4 occurs 25 years after the original game did, chronologically, marking it the real-world equivalent to basically Blazinski's departure from the franchise where Coalition takes over, so that's what Gears 4 represents. Gears 4 also keeps some analogs to previous enemies like the Locust units and some of the old gameplay mechanics and some of the old story references, so there's a callback to the previous games despite this new direction with the story, and it attempts to change things up at least with the addition of some new enemy units and environs like the robots that sort of take things over. And these robots, by the way, are controlled by the tyrannical cogs working in marriage to build cities and bulk up defenses against the storms. Our players, meanwhile, live in a village of renegades that's powered by a windmill and a water wheel. Very romantic in that regard, following the loss of fossil fuels from Gears of War 3 when Locust destroyed the traditional sources of mass power. So it's not exactly the most original setup. There's an apocalypse event, AI takes over, and humans are now outlawed in a land that they once ruled. That's not really new just from a top-level storytelling standpoint, and there's even an energy crisis to create a sense of constant urgency, just to keep things really as cookie cutter as possible. But despite that sort of low praise, in the very least, the atmosphere is new and interesting, and despite its somewhat cliched storytelling backdrop, the environment is visually compelling and unique enough to get excited about during the gameplay. And then you're brought back underground to where it all started 10 years ago, in sort of real time at least, and even there, the game is kept alive with a constant battle of wits between lead character JD Phoenix and his BFF Dell, constantly bickering for comic relief and backstory. Marcus Phoenix adds a Brock Sampson-like complaining that adds enough entertainment value on its own, with top-notch voice acting for delivery of those lines to really make the characters more endearing. And that's all backed up with high-quality visuals too. The geometry is complex enough to offer smooth transitions between the rock faces and the meshes, particle effects are immersive, and screen space reflections, if your PC can handle them, make for intensely detailed, shiny surfaces. The characters have detailed skin texturing too, and wrinkle maps, and with geometrically complex faces and well-posed facial expressions, there's really a lot of depth to be had when interacting with the other characters in the game. And again, we talk more about that in our Gears of War 4 graphics benchmark on our various GPUs if you're interested. The game's story and atmosphere really make for the most immersive aspect of the play experience. It's unfortunately plagued, though, by Microsoft's store in at least some ways. This is a title that we generally recommend for folks who enjoy third-person shooters and maybe a focus on story, but just know going into it that you're dealing with 1, an 80GB download, and 2, a store which often breaks in ways that requires re-downloads. The store also doesn't allow verbose specificity of file path installs, so you end up with some files kind of all over a drive in ways that might not be desirable or really understandable, though at least they can be installed off of the C drive this time anyway, but you're still dealing with sort of a not completely specified file path, and there are then encryption issues after that. When we tried to copy the game from one drive to another, we were unable to do so, and that was because of either corruption of the files or encryption. And with 80GB of files, it's certainly possible for corruption to happen in the downpipe. So, despite having to download the game twice for use in the same physical location on the same LAN, and it being 80GB, the good news is that unlike EA's Origin, we weren't limited to a set number of hardware changes during testing, so no issues were found with our copy when used between different Windows 10 configurations, 2 different PCs, and 10 different video cards. As a game, though, we'll highlight Gears of War 4 for its generally superb visual fidelity, particularly during the cutscenes, and for innovating on an aging franchise, at least somewhat innovating. Some of the core gameplay will feel formulaic to folks who've been through all of the existing Gears titles, but anyone who's had a long break or hasn't played since the last Gears PC release would probably enjoy Gears of War 4. In the very least, the likable and witty characters bring it all home, and almost seem intentionally placed to calm down players after what is sure to be a stressful evening of trying to use Windows Store. So as always, Patreon link to the postal video helps out directly. Link in the description below for the full review written by Keegan and Gallick, and you can find the other content on the channel. I'll see you all next time.